I am so excited that we are entering year 2 of the support from the fireworks community team. I am so excited to have them hosting us today. They're a creative co-working space focused on supporting the local community and uplifting creative entrepreneurs. Get a free day pass. When you book with them, you have to use code DRIVE, or if you go to see them in person to visit their beautiful space and meet their awesome staff, tell them Logan from Your Morning Drive sent you, and you'll get a free day pass to try the space yourself. Fireworks Co-working in Marietta, Georgia.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Your Morning Drive. I am your host, Logan. It is great to have you with me today. I am so excited and so glad that you're here. Before we dive in, I've got a couple of quick requests before our guest today. First, number one, make sure you hit that follow button on whatever platform you're listening on, whether it's Spotify, whether it's Apple, whether you're watching on YouTube. Hit subscribe, hit follow, hit whatever you got to hit to make sure that the episodes get delivered to you every Friday and that you never miss an episode. They come straight to your phone, your computer, whatever you're listening on, so you'll never miss one. Second thing, I need you to share this with just one friend in your life, somebody, whether it's your parent, your neighbor, your coworker, your boss, your ex-girlfriend, somebody in your life who could use a little new podcast, some inspiration, some comedy, some whatever to start their day. Again, you can find us on Apple and Spotify, and if you enjoy the visual experience, you can follow on YouTube as well. Everything is, of course, just Your Morning Drive. For even more content and updates, follow along on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and on there you'll find, like I said, behind the scenes, episode announcements, stuff that deals into sponsorships, all kinds of things like that to keep you entertained throughout the week. My guest today has over 25 years of experience as a pastor, delivering more than 4,000 sermons to congregations ranging from 50 to 2,500 people on stages, television, and beyond. He has spent most of his life connecting with audiences. That's his thing, connecting with audiences. After navigating a 25-year marriage that ended in divorce, the COVID-19 pandemic made him realize that it was time to chase a long-held what if. So he hit his first open mic, and just after 4 performances, he decided to dive in head first. He sold his fun car, bought a PA system and some merch, and 275 shows later, in just 2.5 years, he has not looked back. Please welcome my new friend, Rich Brock.
Thank you, Logan. Great to be here, brother.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. I'm so excited to get you, man. I've been following yours for a while, and I just thought, this got to be a fun time, a good time.
We'll have our moments, man. That's for sure.
Based on the bio that I just read you, and I tell all my guests this, Rich, I don't do a ton of research on my guests, because as you're telling your story and giving me your background and telling me how you got from here to there, I want to be as genuinely entertained and informed as the people listening. So most of my questions, of course, I have bullet points of things I want to hit on, but I probably won't even look at them. All my questions will be pretty authentic and just, I just want to be entertained. So judging from that bio, of course, I do a little bit of research to make sure you're not a serial killer or anything like that, but I've got questions. But
the only one.
But the first one is just, how are you? How's your year? Happy New Year. What's going on in 2025 for you right now?
2025 has got me to show 300 as of about 4 hours from this.
Congratulations.
So 300 episodes or shows that I've headlined. And those are headlining shows. I joke around that I talk too much to be a feature or a host. I have to take the full time. So I just got back from Nashville, did my first show in Nashville over the weekend, did 2 while I was there, got some opportunities coming up there. Man, just doing good. I'm about the time this airs will be 3 years in comedy, a year and a half full time, and just living the dream, working it and grinding away and bringing hope one laugh at a time.
I love that, man. Where did you perform in Nashville?
I was at a place called Third Coast Comedy Club.
Okay.
Third Coast the show was great. And then typical, the joys of being AARP, an AARP guy in a show where everybody else is 20, 30. I finish, load up my merch. One of my friends that lives in Nashville, they came to the show. I'm walking out. Just had a great set, great night. Come down the steps, missed the last one. Take a header right into the Nashville. I thought I was going to own that club before the night was over. And I'm like, well, that'll humble you in a hurry. And when you get my age, Logan, the first thing you think is, I've got to get up immediately or something's going to hurt. I tried to get up immediately, and then I started checking. Okay, I've been to the chiropractor for this, the doctor for this. A little sore, a little embarrassed, but life was good. So did that. Went over to Zany's, which is the big club in Nashville, and one of the biggest in the country, and saw one of my inspirations, a guy named Dusty Slake. He performed there on Wednesday and worked out where he's reached out to me, and I'm going to open a clean night with him. Hopefully by the time this airs, I'll be back in Nashville doing something with Zany's, and it's just fun all the way around.
That's amazing, man. Congrats on that. I know of Dusty. That's awesome, dude. That's so cool.
When I started, I sent a tape to 5 people, Logan. I sent it to people that I admired and I watched. I sent it to Dusty Slay. I sent it to Jeff Foxworthy. I sent it to America's Got Talent. I sent it to Dry Bar Comedy.
Okay.
And I sent to Larry the Cable Guy. And I thought, and all I said in it, I'm a former pastor turned comedian. I've been doing comedy for 3 months. I just did an hour special that I filmed, and here's 19 minutes of it. The next day, I heard back from Dusty Slay.
Your morning drive is also present to us by Good Days Canned Cocktails. Good Days are a classic cocktail brand created in a convenient, ready-to-drink canned format for any occasion, whether it's a pool day, a boat day, a beach day, a graduation, a wedding, a bar mitzvah, anything in between. Good Days are there for you. Good Days are ahead when they are in your cooler, your fridge, your anything in between. Good Days has your back. If you want to be one of the first to try their drink, you can do so by visiting drinkgooddays.com/pages/find-us to find a store near you selling their drink. Of course, you must be 21 years of age to consume and purchase.
In an email, and I love his opening line. He goes, "When I saw you were a former pastor, it got my interest."
Sure.
When I saw it was 19 minutes long, I thought, there's no way I'm watching this. And he said, but I did, and I enjoyed it. And you've got your thing. Don't let anybody mess with who you are and what you do, because comedy's an art form like music, art, everything else. You find your niche. And I found my niche before I got into comedy, being that preacher persona, storyteller, that kind of thing. So Dusty sent me that email, and that was like throwing gas on a fire.
Yeah.
It inspired me. It encouraged me. I had never met him. Just that simple, you got it, keep going. Ran into him at one of his shows maybe a year later, and I went up to say hello, and he recognized me. So, I've been following you. What have you been up to? And I'm like, man, what a fuel to the fire to keep this thing running. And so, yeah, that's how all that Nashville stuff opened up.
Man, Dusty, I knew the name, but I just Googled it to make sure I knew who we were talking about. Dusty Slay, I need to try to get him on the show, because he a saying that I've incorporated into my everyday life whenever I'm not having a good time. He was on a Netflix special a few years ago where, Netflix did this thing where they said it was like a comedy show, and each 25-minute episode was a different comedian, and Dusty was one of them. And me and my wife are watching, because we do like stand-up comedy. We like to discover new comedians. And so we're watching this guy. I'd never heard of him before. And of course he gets up there and he tells a few jokes, and it hits with a couple people. For the most part, the audience is silent.
Yeah.
And he says to himself out loud, we're having a good time. And in that moment, I don't care what joke he just told, that self recognition, the self-deprecating humor that he had, just saying the audience isn't laughing, so I'm going to make another little joke at myself. We're having a good time. And it generated more laughs throughout that
Yeah.
25-minute episode. And by the end, everyone was cackling because they were like, this guy is great.
Yeah.
And when I happen to whip that line out quite often, especially when I hit the course with some of my friends and we're golfing, and I am the token bad golfer in our friend group. So whenever, and I don't know why I go in expecting to do well, because I know I'm not great at golf, but whenever I get on the first tee box, I'm like, maybe today will be different. And I shank it hard right into the woods, probably hit somebody. I immediately always say, I'm having a good time. I'm having a good time. I'm having a good time. And so that's freaking awesome. That's full circle moment there.
It's taken that and put that on every hat, t-shirt, whatever, and made great money.
I'm sure
we're having a good time.
I'm sure.
Very much
That's what turned us on to him. So that's awesome.
Cool.
That's awesome that you're going to do that with him,
I'm
man.
looking forward to it. And, he is a main player on the Nate Land podcast, Netflix specials. I mean, he's just the real deal. And again, those guys that I sent that to were people that I'd paid money to go see before.
Sure.
And that's why I reached out to them. I was like, and they, I'm a clean comic. I don't always advertise it because I feel like you'll figure out who I am in 10 minutes of my hour or however long the set is. And you'll have a good time. You'll have fun. And one of my favorite stories when I was doing my open mics, I went down to Midtown at Laughing Skull and, I don't know if you're familiar and folks listening to do those open mics at big clubs like that, or, it's not a big capacity, but it's big recognition. You have to send them an email, send them a tape, send them something, let them know a little bit about yourself, and then they pick you or not. You just don't walk in and put your name on this. So I just sent them maybe a one paragraph, who I was, and they responded back and said, hey, can you be here next Wednesday?
Wow.
And I'm like, sure. And I thought that was normal. And I'm talking to other guys who are like, man, we waited 6 months or 3 months for our first one. And just a 3-minute open mic and, 26 guys and gals, and it takes forever. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm too old for this. But I looked at it and I'm like, how did I get on there? And the guy that booked me said, well, you said you're a former pastor. We thought you'd really stink and it'd be funny, or you might be funny because you had some experience. And I did 3 there, and 2 out of the 3 I hit. One, I hit a home run. The other maybe a double, and the other was a sacrifice fly. But when I hit my home run there, I thought, okay, I can do this somewhere. I just got to figure out where. And it's first open mic I ever did, I did right after COVID. During COVID, as you mentioned in the intro, I was thinking about not regrets, but thinking about what is something I've never done that I'd regret not trying. And the first thing that popped up was an open mic. And that's crazy. I was a TV preacher. I, like I said, preached 4,000 sermons, done enough Bible studies. I've preached in prisons. I've preached in old folks home or assisted living centers, you name it. And I thought that's something I've never done. And since I was a teenager, I wanted to do. And I got on one, came the day, and I got cold feet and I canceled. And that's a guy that spoke 25 plus years. And I'm like, I'm not ready. Well, I called back, got on the next month, showed up. I had a bunch of divorce jokes, and it was like 18 comics and about 9 paid customers. 6 of them were a bunch of divorced women out having drinks and hanging out. So everything I'm doing is a boo. I got 2 guys in the corner like, yeah. I thought, what the heck, man? I'm just going all in. And I did all my divorce material because you do what you know. And that's what I knew at the time. But I knew when I finished that I could do better, and I couldn't wait to do it again. And I did another one. Like I said, I did a third one. I did 5 open mics, and then I got booked to do a show at I tease, I called it a lesbian dog park in Atlanta because everybody there had a dog and they were a couple,
Yeah.
And here I am, Big Rich coming in, Mr., former pastor turned comedian. But the thing I learned, Logan, and I've learned in my shows, I've hired 65 comics a year over my first 3 years to do shows with me. I'll stack that up against anybody that doesn't have the word club written in their name. And the thing I do is I go around like the old pastor in me and meet people before the show. Hey, how you doing? Thanks for coming out. Good to see you. Some people get nervous because they think I'm going to pick on them, during the show.
Sure. Yeah.
And, oh, no, I ain't telling you my name. I said, listen, I got 2 ex-wives in an hour. I'll never get to you. And that makes some of their defenses go down a little bit.
Sure.
But what I've learned is if you'll take a minute and get to know people, say hello, be friendly, they'll connect with you. And even if they don't get your style of comedy, they'll listen. And they'll appreciate the fact that you took a little time with them. So, if I have a show at 7, I'm there setting up, get everything done. I'm spending 20 minutes greeting people. Afterwards, I'm out there. And that's why I get hired at wineries, breweries, restaurants, because I'm helping build a base and selling whatever they're selling. So,
wow. I want to go back to something you said a few minutes ago about how when you were into that club, I think it was in Nashville, and you look out in the audience and it's just all 25-year-olds.
yes. Yeah.
Did you see that coming in terms of because I've seen some of your stuff, and like you said, like you're making divorce jokes, and not a lot of 25-year-olds might not laugh or really maybe they'll laugh, but maybe they don't get it in their early 20s. But
yeah, one of my favorite lines that I do is I say, I grew up in the 1900s. And when I say that, it always gets a chuckle. I don't care how old they are. But like the other night, I'm in Nashville, and after the Dusty show, there's a open mic. Somebody said, hey, would you do, a spot? We got you on. And by the time I went up, everybody my age, except for 3 people, started off sold out. By the time I went up an hour and a half later, there's 30 people left. Out of that 30, maybe 4 are over 40 years old.
Sure.
Because they got jobs. They got to provide for their family. They can't stay out all night, So I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And I do the same. Now, one of the things that happened at Laughing Skull, when I went in there, they like you, to stay in the green room, stay in the back. I asked them, I said, can I sit out here? Because I want to learn. I just started. I wanted to learn. I wanted to observe other comics. I wanted to see what the audience saw. And they're like, as long as there's room, sure. That place, however many seats it is, it fills up in a hurry. So I shared a booth with a couple. 25, 26 years old. I'm getting up. Y'all sit here. They didn't know I was performing. They said, oh, no, this is your seat. I said, no, guys, y'all sit here or join us. So I sat with them through the first hour. The guy gets up. He goes to the girl gets up first, goes to the restroom. I said, man, how's it going? He goes, good. I said, y'all dating? He goes, first date.
Oh, boy.
I was like, how's it going? He goes, good, man. And I said, awesome. Glad to hear it. Beautiful couple. Hope things work out. She comes back. He goes to get him a drink. And I said, hey, y'all having a good time? She goes, yeah. I said, how long have you known each other? She goes, it's our first date. I said, how's it going? She goes, okay, I have a mission here. I got to help this guy. So, we sit there and chat, and then it's my time. And I was like, would y'all watch my jacket? I'll be right back. They thought I was going to the bathroom or something. I'm 50-something years old. I'm the only 50-something year old in there at this point.
Sure.
I go up, I do my set, and I didn't say a cuss word the whole time, which was probably the only person that night out of 26 that didn't.
Sure.
I got great response. Afterwards, this couple's waiting on me. He walks up, he goes, that was effing amazing. But he didn't, say effing. He goes, you didn't effing cuss one effing time. I am effing blown away. And I just grinned. I was like, well, you cursed enough.
You covered my set. Yeah.
And they were like, do you do shows? I said, no, I just started. Like, this is my second open mic. And he's like, well, when you get a show, you let us know. And they're still dating 3 years later. and they've been to one of my shows. So I tell them I'm the love doctor.
I love that, man. That's so cool.
I've had people come to their first date, at my show and ask me to do their wedding because I'm a former pastor.
I was going to say, that's the first thought that came to my mind. I was like, what if this couple gets married and they ask you to do their wedding?
Put that on them, but I did have a couple more in my age bracket, and I knew her. We went to school together, and she brought her first date to my show. And it went well. And a year later, they're getting married, and they asked me to do the wedding. And I get asked to do funerals more as a comedian than a pastor, which I've done. And they're like,
yeah, what's that like? Come on, Rich. Yeah. Come on, man.
It's like this. He's a friend. He was a friend. His son is one of my best friends on the planet. And he's like, my dad wants you to do his funeral, but he doesn't want you to be Pastor Brock. He wants you to do Big Rich Comedy. And I'm like, how's this going to go? And I kept saying, I've been asked to do this. I've been asked to do this.
I'm not here just
by him, 20 minutes in. I'm like, everybody's laughing, everybody's having fun. Of course, I was respectful, and we had that time that I've got enough brain power to know you don't just go in and start throwing down jokes. But I'm like, somebody said, man, this could be your niche. And I said, would you like me to do yours? Do you have a date planned? I mean, I can't wait on people to die.
Right.
But, I'm doing a show for folks that are renewing their wedding vows. And they asked me to do a set for their family and friends. I mean, Logan, what cracks me up about these three, like I said, within 2 weeks, it'll be 300 paid headlining shows. I always stretch that party, and they were paid gigs. But
yeah, sure.
First show I ever did at that dog park, they paid me $25. And when I left, I pulled over on the side of somewhere that probably wasn't a good place in Atlanta to pull over. But I teared up because I was like, man, I just got paid to do something I love. I'm like, I couldn't call myself a paid comedian yet. I wanted to have a few more under my belt, but it hit me, man. That guy paid me to do comedy. And little did I know that a year and a half later, I'd be doing it full time. And I go after it with the same mentality I did as a church planter. I go into places and I tell other comics, and I'll get people wanting to be the Lowe's to my Home Depot. They want to build off my back. Sure. And that's part of life, no matter what you do.
Right.
But when I started, I went to places where I spent money, wineries, breweries, wherever.
Sure.
Asked them if they ever thought about doing comedy. Most said, we've thought about it, but we haven't pulled the trigger. What's your slowest night? And they'd tell me Wednesday, usually. I said, how about if I do a show? What will you pay me? They said, man, we ain't going to pay you nothing. I said, well, can I sell tickets? And I'll take the ticket money and I'll promote food, drinks, and whatever throughout the show. Sure, let's go for it. So I did my first one in Cartersville, Georgia, had the show, put it on Face World, as my mother called it, and somebody saw it. Another place that I've visited, that winery, Big Door Vineyards in White, Georgia. I've done 28 shows there. I'm there every month or every other month. One of their owners, Ray Parker, saw it, messaged me, hey, I didn't know you did comedy. How long you been doing it? 2 days. And he's like, well, let's book a show. And every show that I've booked up to this point of 300 have all came to me. Now, I know I've got to figure out how to market more.
Sure.
But so far, I've been busy because people, my age bracket, Facebook, is my marketing guru.
Yeah.
They, younger folks find me on Instagram. Got a little bit, I told my boys, I said, hey, your dad's going to be a TikToker.
Oh, they probably said that.
I said, oh, it's just baby pictures of y'all, and stuff. But I do a little bit of that stuff. But Facebook and Instagram are how I built my brand, and word of mouth, just word of mouth. I've booked shows this week where people have just emailed and said, hey, I saw you at this winery. Would you do this fundraiser? Would you do our corporate event? Would you come and speak to our realtors will hire me they'll do a show for everybody that's bought a house in 3 years.
Yeah.
It's some winery or brewery, and I come in and do an hour, and it's just a feel good night, that kind of thing.
Sure.
Anyway.
Wow, man, this is awesome. I mean, this is so cool for me. I don't know. I mean, dude, I can't wait to now come see shows, because I just feel First of all, you're a great speaker and you've got that pastor voice. I'm sure you've been told that before. You have a great voice for radio, for speaking, for comedy. But when you set out to start doing the comedy thing from the get-go, were you like, I'm going to be a clean comic? Like, I'm not going to tell dirty jokes. And if I do say a dirty joke, it's going to be like almost like a hint to a dirty joke. Like, was that the goal from the get-go? Or did you just think, I'm going to try certain things, and if they stick, they stick? I mean, being a pastor for so long, I would assume that you went into it saying, I'm going to be clean.
I didn't go into it like thinking I was going to be the next Sam Kinison.
Right.
Though I've got a little bit of that background, but I didn't know what. I think one of the things about comedy or anything you do, entertainment, you got to find your identity. And open mics, and like I said, I did 5. But what I would do is I would go to business clubs, networking groups for my day job. I used to be a home inspector, and I would do bits and jokes. I had 60 seconds. I'd work material. I'd call my insurance guy who had a good sense of humor and give him 5 minutes over the phone. I'd call another guy that I knew or some lady, or I'd go to the bank and I'd do maybe 2 minutes. And because I didn't want to stay up till midnight, driving to Atlanta or Chattanooga.
Right.
And a lot of open mics are just another bunch of open micers and comics sitting around waiting on their 3 minutes. And I'm like, at the time I was married. Me and my ex-wife had 7 kids between us. I had plenty to do.
Right.
So I didn't set out necessarily to be anything other than who I was. I had my moments, and on the stage, out of probably 350 things that I've done, I have said 2 pretty strong cuss words.
Wow.
And neither one of them worked because it ain't me,
Mm-hmm.
It might be with my best friends in 7th grade.
Sure.
A lot of innuendos, a lot of, as I've been told, what makes my show what it is I come right out of the gates as a former pastor turned comedian. And when I do swear in my show, if I do, it's normally when I was 7 or 10, or instead of Big Rich saying it, it was Little Richie saying it. And it gives people, I've got a bit I do about Smokey and the Bandit. If you haven't seen it, you got to make time to go see, to watch it. But Smokey and the Bandit was the first movie I ever saw in a drive-in theater. My parents took me. I do a thing about going through financial hardship as a kid when I joined the Columbia House Record Club. Now, that's way before your time. You'll have to Google it, Logan, to understand it. But you bought 12 albums or tapes for a penny. But then you had to buy 4 at like $30 a pop. In the 1970s and 80s, it was like $100 a pop. But they would send you 12 albums for that 1 penny, or 13 for $1 when inflation hit. So I got those things. And one of them I got was the original motion picture soundtrack of Smokey and the Bandit. Now, I grew up in a Christian home. My parents were very, strong, moral people, salt of the earth. I never heard either one of my parents cuss.
Okay.
I made up for it, but now they might have cussed like sailors when I went to bed.
Sure.
My God, what is this boy putting us through? But I never heard it. So Smokey and the Bandit, Jackie Gleason's famous line is "some bitch."
Yeah.
I never heard it. So I'm listening to it and I'm walking around the house. Some bitch,
Yeah, sure.
My dad's like, "Hey, we having that."
Yeah.
So the bit is I was playing the album and he came in and he lifted up the record, the cover, and he scratched the album. And everybody in the show was like, "Oh," and I was like, "Yeah, made me want to say some bitch," but I knew better. And then I forget it because I'm a kid. I go on to something else. A week later, I want to hear Eastbound and Down. I'm jamming out to it. And then this CB dialogue would come on after it. And when it came on, I remembered, oh God, that's what got me in trouble.
Yeah.
But before I could get to it, all you heard throughout our house was, "When I find you, you son of a bitch, 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 bitch." And I'm like, what are the odds? He scratched it right where that was. So I'll do that, and people, they don't even count that.
Yeah.
Because I don't drop the F-bomb. I'm not political. I'm not, occasionally I'll do something and, and it's not a guy asked me the other day, it's yours. He came in off the street to a theater show and his first words were, "Is this a Christian show?" And I said, "Hell yeah, it is."
Well, that's a perfect response to that.
Just to mess with him, and everybody don't send me, and I don't get a lot of hate mail. I do get praying for your soul mail, and it's from the same three people. So please don't send me any more praying for your soul mail. It was a joke. And I said, "Hell yeah, it is." And he just looked at me.
Yeah.
And then he said, "Well, is it free?" And I was like, "Okay, you sound like a lot of Christians. I used to pastor, and I just worked the material on this."
Sure.
And, he ends up paying his $20, gets a ticket, has a great time. But don't blame, finding my voice took me about a year of doing, and I mean, a guy told me the other day that works with me some, and he's become a friend. He said, "In 3 years, how many hours of comedy stage time do you have?" And I said, "Well, I do an hour set most nights, and I've done 300 plus a few here and there. And that doesn't count practice, this and that. So you start figuring probably 400 hours." And he's like, "I've been doing comedy 15 years and I don't have anywhere close to that. I do 10, 15 minutes at a time." And he goes, "That's why I understand you now." Because he says, "I've worked with you enough and I figured out my voice. I figured out my identity." Like I said, and Dusty Slay, I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but what I admire, one of the things I admire about him, yeah, he's a believer too, but he's a comic.
Sure.
I mean, I'm a comic who happens to be a believer. I might touch on it at some point. Sometimes I might talk about when I was a pastor, but most of my show, I talk about growing up in the 1900s. I talk about parenting. I talk about dating in my 50s, divorce, stuff like that.
Sure. I mean, finding your voice, especially as someone who is going down the clean comic route, it would be very difficult for me, only because, like, a lot of my favorite comedians are clean comics. Brian Reagan, Jim Gaffigan was my first. I remember the first time I ever watched a stand-up special on Netflix, it was Jim Gaffigan. And his whole set was about the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And we grew up Catholic. So I found those jokes hilarious. And I sent the link to my parents and I said, "You guys have to watch this. Watch it with an open mind." But they're not like, devout, like only, the Catholic way is the only way Catholics. But I said, "You guys got to watch this." And they did. And ever since then, I mean, we've been hooked on him. And he has gotten less clean over the years, I'll say. Some of his recent specials, he'll drop an ass or a shit or, a few times. But like back in those days, those are like I forget what the names were, like the pale comedian one or like super pale or whatever it was. I mean, he never cursed at all.
Yeah.
But his funniest jokes were always about church. Like, I wish I could recount some of them, but I mean, I used to love them, and to the point where me and my dad eventually went and saw him when he came to Atlanta, and it was great. But like, I mean, I've practiced, of course, stand up. I feel like most people have practiced stand up in their car. Yeah, of course. They're in the shower, in the car, just like turn the radio down and just like start spitballing there. And I find myself at the cadence of like Jim Gaffigan or Jerry Seinfeld and it'd be like, man, it'd be really tough for me to get up and just tell stories as me rather than telling stories in someone else's style. Because I wouldn't want to become that guy that, what if I took off? What if I went crazy and I'm on, I'm doing podcasts with Joe Rogan and hanging out with Bert Kreischer and stuff. And I wouldn't want them to come back to my old stuff and say, "Oh, well, they copied Jerry Seinfeld."
Yeah.
Or they copy this guy, or they copy that guy. It's like, how do you find your voice? It's got to be tough.
I get compared, people older or comedians, I get compared to Jerry Clower, who is an old school Southern, amazing storyteller, and James Gregory, which both of those guys are now passed. So the market's wide open for Big Rich to step in. I joke around, but I saw the first comedian I ever saw. I was 5 years old, and Jerry Clower came to Chickamauga, Georgia, where I'm from, and did a concert or whatever for the high school, some fundraiser. And my dad and mom took me, and there's a picture of me sitting in my dad's lap, just listening.
Enamored.
Yeah, I'm in. And then probably the next comedian I heard in person was James Gregory, did a thing at Dalton College when I was on my college tour, meaning I went to 3, didn't get a 4-year degree out of the 3 I went to. I wanted to go to Georgia, as I teased, but I couldn't get in, so I had to go to Remedial, Georgia, West Georgia College in Carrollton. But it was a top 10 school in 1986, according to Playboy magazine, for partying. Yeah, they recruited me and they said, hey, if you come down here and spend 4 years, we'll be in the top 3. We really feel that. And I made it 6 months before I got a letter, and my dad was a postman. So he had to deliver the letter to the house. It said, your son's no longer welcomed at West Georgia College. So then I went to Dalton, and then I wasn't doing well there. And my dad was my life coach before that term was popular. And he's like, I've got you a job at the mill in Chickamauga, and you've got 1 week to find work, or I've got you lined up there. And they only work 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. They let you off on the Lord's Day, so it ain't that bad. I'm like, oh my God, I got to find something. Find a job. The worst job that I could have come home with that my dad's like, my God, I can't believe you found that as a job. I worked at, before Blockbuster got popular, I worked at this place called Pro Video, VHS tapes, before Blockbuster came on the scene and put us out of business. But that job was me sitting there selling, renting them out. And of course, we had the porn section behind a curtain. When people realized it was Richie Brock from Chickamauga working in there, they turned around and left because I knew everybody. My daddy was the mailman. So I don't know where they went to find it, but they didn't come in there anymore. And I did that for like 6 or 7 months. And then I became a believer at 21. And 21 and a half, I went back to college, did well, went into ministry, started being a youth pastor at 22. Then I was an associate pastor of a half black, half white, non-denominational, spirit-filled, charismatic church. Now, trying to fit that on a softball jersey.
I was going to say, good Lord.
In Chattanooga, Tennessee. And that church went from three families to 3,000 people in probably 6 years. And I worked there as the associate pastor. And then at 31 years of age, I was sent out to plant a church in Dalton, Georgia. And so here I am, 31 years old, planting a church. And it was me, my ex-wife, and my 2-year-old. And did that for probably 11 years. And then took a job at a mega church in New Orleans because I'm telling you that anybody that's a small business owner or does anything from the ground up, you know the struggle. And that church grew to, maybe 300 people, but probably had 3,000 come through the doors in a decade or 11 years. So, to go from that, then came back to Dalton, planted another church. And in the midst of that, and people ask, well, why did you get out of ministry? What happened? And I always tease in my shows, well, not always, but a lot of times I'll say, man, y'all have heard it before, sex, drugs, and alcohol. And I said, I'm just kidding. I never did drugs. And then I'm like, I'm playing. I do. What do you think, folks? I know you got something on you. I can tell by that look in your eye. And, and everybody laughs or they get pissed, one or the other.
Yeah, sure.
And I say, no, I just went through a divorce. I was married. We met in college, dated 3.5 years, married 24 and a half, and raised 3 exceptional young men, or today young men. And I think like a lot of folks, we stayed together for our kids and we just were roommates. We just were parents. We coexisted. When we looked at each other and said, she's like, I just don't want to do this anymore. And I'm like, I don't want to be divorced. My parents were never, I was going to be the first in my family to go through that. But we did, and it was tough. But at the same time, I look back, and it's probably one of the most liberating things I've ever went through. But I didn't want to be that. And people do it, but I was broken. I didn't have anything to give anybody. I needed time. The same time I was going through that divorce, I decided, okay, I'm not going to be a pastor. I got to find something else to do for the first time in my adult life. And my sweet mom that I talk about a lot in my show, she went under hospice care and she passed within a month of me going through that divorce. So I'm like,
Real broken time.
I'm like, I took a job as a home inspector and I said, my own little business, and my specialty was vacant houses because I didn't want to see people. I just didn't want to deal with nobody. And people ask me a lot, especially church shows. I'll say, I wasn't mad at God. I love God. I only like about 5 people. And one of them's here today. I'm like, I just didn't want to be around people. And it took me some time.
Sure.
And I'd say, 2 years of that. And I got to the place where I'm like, okay, I know. And I joke around. I say, in the midst of that, I found my purpose again. I found something I'm good at. I enjoy it. And I'm having some success. Online dating. I'm just kidding, folks. It's comedy, but it sounds, and that's how I found comedy.
Wow.
That's a mouth.
I can't, well, yeah, but I can't imagine but rightfully so at the same time, when the new year hits, everyone's reevaluating their life. And so when you go through something like a divorce, it almost makes you take a step back and just look at everything you've got going on. You're looking at all the things on a table and you're like, all right, well, this one's gone now.
Yeah.
And I assume your boys are grown and off doing their own thing. So they're all gone. And then you're looking at being the only thing left right there is being a pastor. And you're like, well, everything else has changed. Should this change too?
Yeah.
Or what? I mean, you were set on finding something else to do. Is there any alternate universe where you would have stayed a pastor?
I tease now, Logan, and I say, people ask me, would you ever pastor again? The only way I would do it is if you could pick the people that came to your church, like a fantasy football league. I'd be all in. I know a lot of first rounders, but, and you'll hear, and there's a Bible scripture that basically paraphrase. So if you're watching, I don't know the address, as they like to say, but it basically says the gifts and callings of God are without recompense, meaning they're not going anywhere. And most of the time when I've heard that quoted, it's from a pastor who's about to lose his job, trying to let everybody know, hey, this ain't going anywhere. I'm not that scripture. There's a lot, it's the scriptures, but my gifts that I'm using now are the same gifts I used as a pastor. I connect with people. I bring hope. Laughter is like a medicine. On occasion, people say, well, sometimes you get off on the things. I said, man, I'm like watching primetime TV at 9:00. That's how I describe my comedy. Golden Girls. You remember the Golden Girls?
Of course.
I love people say, what kind of show is this going to be? I said, I'm like the Golden Girls. I'll talk about sex for 30 minutes, but you wouldn't know it unless you've had it a time or two, and you'll, oh my Lord, I know what he's talking about. So yeah, I was at that place where I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew I had one son at that time in college, one in high school, and one in middle school. And I had responsibilities and I wanted to be close to them. And I knew I couldn't be in the same house, but 50% of the time. So I started that business through just knew it's something you didn't have, one of the joys of I left college to pursue ministry, a full-time position, right at the start of my senior year. And I was a communications major, but I was getting a job offer at the time was my goal, my dream. And I was affiliated with that ministry for 18 years. So it was a pretty good call. But I look back now and wish I'd finished. That's one thing I wish I'd done different. But these days, even, as with a college degree, okay, nice. It's kind of like back in my day, having a high school diploma. It showed you could do, you could be committed to something. And if you're a go-getter, and that's the way I do comedy, man, I get after it. Sure. I get after it. Most of my time, show business, as I was taught by a comic that's way further along. The word business is bigger than the word show. So it's a lot of business. It's a lot of marketing. It's a lot of follow-up. It's a lot of emails. It's a lot of content. I spend way too much time on marketing than I do comedy. But as the brand grows and as my name gets out there, I'll be able to hire people down the road and I can focus. And one of the greatest compliments I've gotten, a 40-year seasoned comic said, I love what you do, but I can't wait to see what you're like when you have time to be creative, because you have to spend so much time. How much time? I said 75% of my time is doing things like this, marketing and, this. It's just there'll come a day when you can focus that attention on writing. I'm working on a book, and I say that publicly because it makes me go home tonight and work on it. But I truly believe God, or, higher power, for me, it's God, inspired the title. Now I just got to write the book.
Sure.
And it's from the pulpit to the punchlines, how I went from where I was to where I am today. It's a self-help, it's inspirational, it's comedy, it's all of it wrapped up into one.
I can't wait to read it.
So I'm halfway there. I just got to make time to finish it and march forward. So.
Yeah. I actually just started one the other night because, I was talking to a business coach, and she was telling me, she was like, all the successful podcasters in the world, they all have a book.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, but I'm like, it's just the imposter syndrome of like, yeah, but no one wants to buy a book by me. Like, no one's going to buy that. They're like, at the worst, your 50 closest friends and family will buy it.
Yeah.
And they'll market it, hopefully.
Yeah.
And then maybe another 50 people will buy it. And then maybe another 50 people will buy it. I'm like, yeah, well, we'll see. I really, truly want to similarly to you, keep talking about it openly so that it holds me accountable. And whether I just write it, whether you probably agree, but as long as I'm writing at least one day a week, even if it's for 20 minutes, like at least I marched forward on it.
Yeah.
But,
That's good.
Yeah. We'll see. I get excited. I'm one of those that I get excited about an idea, and then for like 3 weeks, I'm all in. And then the fourth week, I'm like, eh. It's like the dopamine wore off. And I'm like, yeah, well, what else could I do?
Yeah.
But I'm really trying to, we'll see if we can make it happen.
Good deal.
But, yeah, man, I've thought about doing open mics myself, and because I am the one, like I said, I'm the bad friend. I'm the bad golfer in my friend group, but I am the comic relief. I am there making the Happy Gilmore quotes. I'm, quoting all the famous golf movies. I'm making stupid remarks. I'm throwing clubs. I'm just there for a good time with my friends, but I am the comic relief. And even just last night, I noticed, I took a step back and realized that, we were just hanging out at a buddy's house and we were playing cards and just, shooting this, what. And I was like, I am the comic relief at our friend group. Everyone says funny things, but I feel like, and maybe you could relate to this, I feel like in every situation where we're having a conversation, unless it's a really serious conversation, I feel the need to throw a quick line in every single time. And how difficult it is to not do that in times where we're talking about something serious. Yeah. It's like, oh, I see, like, the joke is right there. And I'm like, God, if I could just, but I'm like, but the people in the room might hate me for it. But I don't know. It's hard to resist that urge.
It is. And I look back, and one of the things I love about what I'm doing, and especially the early stages, 3 years is not a long time. It's longer when you're 50. I turned 57 last 2 weeks ago. So, I made a 5-year plan when I started comedy. I set out, here's what I want to accomplish. Here's what I want to do. On that list, when you're a clean comic, Dry Bar Comedy is the #1 app in the world for clean comedy. I thought, I want to have a Dry Bar special by year 5. I got that 9 months in to doing comedy, which is insane.
Very.
And they didn't know I'd only been doing comedy 9 months. They watched that same tape. I sent Dusty Slay, and I sent Jeff Foxworthy, and I sent AGT, and they responded and said, hey, we want to put you on, I think it was season 12. And can you be in Provo, Utah, of all places, which is like it's a top-notch facility, top-notch. It's basically a TV studio that was built with a comedy club around it.
Okay.
I mean, and it's phenomenal. And, Adam Carolla just did a special there. There's a lot of big hitters at Dry Bar, but then there's a lot of folks that you've never heard of. And when I got there, the first thing we did was, first of all, they wanted you to bring 3 different wardrobes because they got to look for lighting, all that. I'm a big dude, man. I might not have but 4 choices, And then I'm thinking, I don't fly much. I don't want to tote all that. So I shipped it, UPS or FedEx or somebody, to Dry Bar instead of calling and sent an email, said, hey, be on the lookout for a package with my name on it. And they're like, okay, sure. Is it like merch? I said, no, it's my clothes. I said, that costs $25 compared to 80,
Right.
with the airlines. So they're like, oh my gosh, man, this guy is crazy. So I get there and you have to do like a 30-second promo saying who you are, thanking everybody. If they want a tip, you just thank them. And I was like, okay. And I did it. And I was like, is that, you want to do another one? They're like, no, that's perfect. And they're like, how long you been doing this? I said, oh, about 8 months comedy. And they're like, no, seriously, we wouldn't have hired you if it only been 8 months. I said, well, I was a TV preacher for 5-6 years. I was a pastor for 12. We get it. We understand. So Dry Bar opened up. It hadn't made me famous. It hadn't made me wealthy, but it's given me some opportunities.
For sure.
Not all, but almost every show I do, somebody will come up and say, I found you on Dry Bar. The other thing, to get back to my point about comedy at this level, most shows I go to, I don't know a lot of people, but I've reconnected with people in my small town of Chickamauga, Georgia. Small town, 2,000 people. Probably 2,500 of them have been to a Big Rich show. I run into people every week.
That's awesome.
I grew up with, I went to high school with. My 6th grade teacher came to a show. And then she came back and she called me and says, hey, I'm going to bring my mother. I'm like in an urn. I mean,
I was just going to say, she's still alive.
She was 97.
Wow.
Never been to a comedy club.
Wow.
And I got done and I was like, well, how was it? She goes, well, I'm out. I was like, great. Glad she paid. I got $20 out of her.
Yeah, for real.
But, it's just fun reconnecting. And one of my she's the superintendent of the school system now. She was a teacher when I was in school. She came to a show with her husband and after said, man, that was great. She goes, I can't believe you're making a living doing the things that got you suspended in school.
Right.
You spent more time in the principal's office, but you're telling stories that happened through those experiences. And another thing you asked earlier about relating with the 25-year-olds, I tell folks, I said, listen, you're going to understand your parents better after this show. You're going to understand why your dad's the way he is.
Yeah.
When you come to my show.
Right.
And most of the time they get it and they're into it. When I struggle, most of the time is when I do the only times where, knock on wood, where you talk about bombing. I've been fortunate. I think I bombed a lot in sermons.
Really?
In 25 years.
What does bombing a sermon look like?
Nobody comes forward. Nobody gave. My God, the offering
was just a note that said, do better.
It's kind of like I tease, man, talking about the tooth fairy. I said one time, it's happened to so many of us. You talk about the tooth fairy came and your dad or mom, if you're listening, kids, close your ears. They put the money under your pillow, and my dad accidentally put 100 instead of $1 because it was dark.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, the tooth fairy made a mistake.
The tooth fairy called me this morning and said that she accidentally left it.
So I joke around in my shows about my dad being frugal. And for people your age bracket, that means good with money.
Sure.
For my age, that means he was tight.
Yeah, sure.
And my boys are like, man, granddad wasn't frugal. No, granddad wasn't. But dad was, man. My granddad's handed out Ulysses S. Grants for not missing a day of school. I didn't even know he was a president, much less on the $50 bill. I had no idea.
Yeah.
All I saw was George. Anything was $1. You got $1. So I remember I was teasing. I said, the tooth fairy one time left me $1 and a note. You better brush your teeth. I'm going to come back and get that $1. But I think younger folks, most of the time, it's a breath of fresh air. And I talk enough about family that, the only people that I get permission from are my boys. I don't want to say anything. I've been married twice, and I tease that I married a second time just to have an alibi for my comedy. So talk about an ex-wife and nobody know which one, so I can tell my boys, oh, that's not your mother. That's the other one. They're like, oh yeah, right. But like a lot of guys my age, I went through that long standing marriage, divorce. A couple years later, I remarried and was married a year. And she went through the same kind of things I went through. And we looked at each other after a year and thought, why did we do this? This isn't you're wanting to pursue comedy. I'm wanting to live, big city, this and that. So we just said, hey, the only thing we have together is a house. So, you buy me out, I buy you out, we're done. And we never look back. But in my shows, sometimes when I'll hit a serious note every once in a while, and I'll talk about, my first divorce, it broke me. It broke me, my heart. It broke my, I was broken. The second one just embarrassed me. I mean, I can't believe I did it. It's just crazy. And I looked at my family, and on both sides of my family, Logan, there's 2 people that have been married 3 times. My cousin on my dad's side and my Uncle Fred on my mom's. Now, my Uncle Fred was married 3 times to the same woman. She was married multiple times, and every time she divorced, he would remarry her. And I was like, so I can't do that. I've already messed that up, thank God. But my cousin on my father's side, similar story, was married a long time, not as long as me, but had his family, remarried a crazy woman or a woman, and then waited a little while, met his third wife, and man, he knew what he wanted. She knew what she wanted. And they've been married 30 years. They have 16 grandchildren. They've got a phenomenal life. And I'll finish the show. I did a tape special called Third Time's a Charm. And that's how I ended the night. I said, third time's a charm, and then walked off the stage. So I don't go into every show. If I'm getting to do what I do, if you ask, what is a big, rich show? It's me having one opener. Sometimes I'll have a guy do 5 minutes or 8. Then I'll have a feature. But then I come in and I cover 15, maybe 18 bits that covers an hour, maybe an hour and 15. And if I see you're in, I'll go I'll go an hour 15. But if I feel, oh man, they're just not, they're done.
Yeah.
They've had a good time, but they're done.
Right.
I'm wrapping up.
You'll feel the energy of the room.
And most of the time, like I finished a show in Cartersville at the Legion Theater recently, 75 seat place. And people say, man, that ain't that big. Laughing Skull is basically that. This little theater, we sold it out, had a great crowd from ages 25 to probably 80 in this show. When I came out, I just said, it's cheesy, but it works to get people loosened up.
Sure.
I'll say, hey, we're going to take a picture because, this is my dream. I started this in my 50s. I want to take a picture. So if you're sitting here tonight with somebody you're not supposed to be here with, duck. And ladies, don't, because it might even be worse.
There you go.
So they're chuckling, and then I'll hold the camera up, and I have it the wrong way, because one night I was filming, and I had it the wrong way. So it was just the wall.
Just the wall of
amazing noise. Turn the camera the wrong way. But I'll do stuff like that to initiate, but also test the energy.
Sure.
You got to test the energy. And when I do bar shows, that's where the preacher persona really comes on. And my voice is shot after the show, because I do those bar shows maybe once every 6 weeks on
Sure.
purpose. And what I mean by a bar show is I'm paid to be there. It's a free show, or maybe $5 or something in Knoxville, or I'll do them in Chattanooga, wherever. And maybe 75% of the people are there for comedy. 25% don't have a clue. So you have to win that 25% over, or they dominate the night because they talk, they're loud, obnoxious sometimes. So it's great for me and to work my chops to do those shows on occasion, but I would not want to make a living doing those every night because they're a lot of work.
Yeah. You got to do a lot of psychology and analysis of people's behavior and their energy. And it's like, goodness gracious. I mean, have you ever gone out? I mean, I'm sure you have. I mean, doing 300 shows or 300 headlining shows, you get out there and you're trying to test the waters and they're just not biting. And you're just like, okay, this is going to be a tough one.
Yeah.
Have you ever been booed?
I do a joke. I do it again. Knock on wood. I don't want no, but in comedy world, what you don't want to do is walk somebody.
Sure.
Meaning they walk out of the show, especially if you're a feature or an opener. And I've had people I've hired that have walked people. And normally it's because I hire them to do, clean. And when I say clean, I said, listen, just avoid curse words. If you got one in your punchline, fine, but don't cuss just to cuss.
Right. Don't say it as a filler word.
Yeah. I try to avoid politics and I try to avoid religion and, just talk, do your thing. And a guy, man, he was struggling, and
the comic.
Yeah. And these guys were being loud and they wouldn't listen to him. And then he went off on them. And then I thought they wanted to punch him, and it's at a bar show. It's not paid, and then I'm paying everybody. So when he finished, nobody clapped. I mean, it was brutal.
I can just feel, I don't even know who this is, and I can just feel the tension in the room.
When I go up, take the mic, and I lean into him and I say, listen, I love you, but I got to throw you under the bus. But just know I'm with you. I believe in you. It's a bad night. And then I went on to say, hey, most of us, how many of y'all came? One of my tricks, how many of y'all came out for the comedy show tonight? Clap your hands. 80% of the people clap, and I'll be like, okay, the rest of you shut the hell up. Or just take it outside, 45 minutes and come back in, take your drinks, go out there and shoot the breeze. And there was, and I know I'm teasing when I say shut the hell up, but most of the time people follow that and they're cool with it, or they'll listen. I said, I got 40 minutes. Hang with me. I believe you'll have a good time. But like those guys, they gathered their stuff and they moved on. And I'm like, that's cool. They knew I wasn't mad at them, and that, but I had to throw my opener under the bus.
Of course.
But he knew it was coming.
Of course.
And the fact that I talked to him about it. But I tease that, and I've had a really good working relationship with Holbrook assisted living centers, and they're throughout Atlanta. Got booked to do one, and these places are swanky, man. I did a show there for Valentine's, and like 250 people are there.
Wow.
I'm like, and this place is swanky. I said, man, y'all's kids love y'all more than mine do. Love me, because I've never been in a place like this. I mean, I don't know where they'll stick me, but I've done, Logan, I did 5 shows in 5 days at 5 different assisted living centers with Holbrook. And I loved it because all the shows were like 2:00. It's like perfect, I'm done by 3:30. I get out of Atlanta before the traffic. But one of my jokes something to touch on that, you talk about comedy. Most of the time, people don't want to try something brand new.
Yeah.
Like that just hit their mind. And I'm at the Comedy Catch at the Lookout Comedy Festival. A fellow named AJ Wilkinson, who's an amazing comic, Captain Autism. That's what he goes by. He was the headliner that night. And the comedy festival picked maybe 30 comics from Florida to California. I got selected and I was one of the quote locals. You know, there were like 2 of us that were local, and I was honored to be there. I didn't realize comedy festivals don't pay. Me anyway. I'm glad it went well, but I booked 5 shows from executives that came out to hear the comics. So, you know, it all worked out. But I'm up there sold out, Comedy Catch, not because of any of us, but AJ sold it out. I'm 4th out of 5 before him and get 8 minutes. I went 10, which is not smart, but it was working. So, you know, I said, what are y'all going to do? You know, complain. I got the crowd where it needed to be. First couple were okay. Third one struggled. Then I come up and I'm just this old, come on, somebody, Mike, you know, that whole preacher thing.
Sure.
And it got them going. And I talk about being an only child, which I am. And I do a bit about that it's only good 2 days out of the year. If you can't figure that out, you're probably wasted right now.
Yeah.
Something, gummies, alcohol, whatever your thing is. And then I talk about when you're my age, when it was somebody like your age, and there was a guy sitting up front who was an only child. I said, listen, brother, when you get my age, it doesn't get any better. I said, because I have to be the decision maker.
Yeah. You have to handle everything.
Yeah. I had to be the one to decide if my sweet mother and my hardworking father went into a nursing home or if I moved them into my 1-bedroom apartment. And everybody just gets quiet. And I said, the nursing home isn't that bad. And they start laughing and carrying on. And I said, listen, I'm just teasing. They're at the cemetery.
They've been gone for a while.
And you hear this guy just say a curse word. He's like, oh, you know,
Yeah.
and everybody not laughing.
Of
and
course.
I was like, now listen, I did that joke at the assisted living center last week and it killed.
I was just going to say.
So that's fine. And then I go into and I did it at the assisted living center.
I was going to say.
It didn't go well. This woman on a little walker booed. She's like, boo. The only time I've been booed. She's like, boo, boo. And I called for security and the Grim Reaper took her out right near the show. But, you know, people, most of the time, the kind of shows I do so far, people know they're coming to see me.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not the opener. I'm the headliner. So they know, okay, this is what I'm going to get. I'm going to get Southern talk. I'm going to get family.
Yeah.
I'm going to get 1900. I'm going to get former preacher, storyteller. And if they're new, they've seen something to bring them there. They haven't just showed up. So
Sure. So with all of that said, so you ultimately chose to take a risk and follow something like you said that you had thought about doing since you were a teenager. How has that put you in a place where you want to help and push other people to chase those what ifs?
Wow, great question. When I was in high school, my senior superlative was wittiest in my senior class. I was also told at graduation walking in that in 10 years, I would probably be dead or a preacher. And I thought, oh my God, a preacher, that'd be awful. I was more concerned about that than death.
You're like, oh God, I mean, dead would be better than a preacher.
And then at 21 or 22, I became a pastor, you know, a preacher. And I'm like, oh Lord. And people in my hometown, I did a hometown show at a festival in Chickamauga, Georgia.
That was probably awesome.
It was one of the highlights of my life already. And, you know, I joked around about it because, you know, Chickamauga is a very small town, but I embrace it. I love it. I love growing up there. And when I did that show, I had the guy that introduced me is the weather guy we grew up together. The weatherman and the anchor of ABC's affiliate in Chattanooga introduced me that night. And I remember his words were, man, I've known Rich since we were first grade. And him being a comedian doesn't surprise me a bit. Now, him being a pastor for 25 years, I thought, hell no. No way. You know, like that was kind of what people thought. And I'd go back home. People say, you really a pastor for real? And I said, yeah, that's what I do. And so getting into comedy, when I did that first open mic, I knew that's something I wanted to pursue. Now, in my mind, Logan, I thought, now, if I put together a show in Cartersville, Georgia, where I live now, and it's just a once a month where open mic and people come out and I MC it and I do my thing. And if that's it, I'm content. I just want an outlet to perform. But after getting into it a little bit, I realized that I had something and that I needed to pursue it. So here I was working, I've downsized my life. I waited till my youngest child's now in college. My middle son's a senior at Kennesaw. My oldest is married, lives in Savannah, got a great start in their life. But Logan, I basically went from owning a home to renting a small apartment from a guy that I met, hired me for a show, believes in what I'm doing. I took anything I had of value besides what I need just to live and sold it. I joke around and I said a fun car.
Yeah. What was your fun car?
It was a little hardtop BMW convertible that I bought. My sweet parents, my mother passed, my dad passed 13 months later. My father and mother were very meticulous. They had everything lined out.
I'm sure.
The easiest thing I had to do at the most difficult time in my life was close their estate. My dad's like, he goes, and this is the way my parents talked to me. I didn't know if they were worth $1 or 10 million. I had no idea.
Yeah.
My father said, when that day comes, everything you need to know is in this little fire safe box in the top of our closet in there. And I remember when I was a little boy, my dad sat me down and my mother and said, if anything ever happens to us, you're going to have this much money and you're going to live with your Aunt Sandra and Uncle Harold. And I said, how much money? You shouldn't be asking that.
Yeah.
It was my favorite aunt and uncle. So I'm like, at the time. So I'm like,
yeah, you're like, all right, that checks that box. Yeah.
So, my point, I went through that time and my dad left me just a card, and in that card, he said, all your adult life, you've been a giver, you've done things for other people, blah, blah, blah. Take this check and do something fun. Not for the boys, but for you. And it was like 10 grand. I'm like, dang, well, I can go have a lot of fun. And I thought about it. I said, I'm going to buy me a used fun car. So I had time. I shopped around, literally bought a car from a widow who didn't want it anymore because her and her husband drove it around and, enjoyed life. And I bought it. And when I started comedy, I was like, that's paid for. I drove over to a car dealer. What will you give me for this? They told me. I went across the street to Guitar Center and bought a $2,600 PA system. I went down to Best Buy, bought a laptop that I just put my comedy stuff on. And then I went and called a friend who had a printing, inkware promotions. And I said, I need 100 t-shirts. And they were this color. This is the OG.
Wow.
Got my little picture, Enjoy Life on the back. Big Rich Brock comedy. Come on, somebody right there. I bought 100 and I paid off one credit card.
Awesome.
And I said, I'm going to start. And I invested in myself.
Yep.
And I had no shows booked, but the following Wednesday night, I had my first show. And I've worked not every week, but in 36 months, like I said, I've done 300 plus shows and paid gigs. And these shirts, when I bought that first 100, actually, it was 100 to get the dollar off. I had to buy so many dozen.
Sure.
And it was like 106 shirts.
Sure.
I do a bit about my senior class at Gordon Lee High School, class of 86. My academic ranking, I know what it was because our principal posted it on the front door of the school for everybody. You couldn't do that today.
No.
You do that today, mothers would be down there, Face World would be all lit up. Somebody had started GoFundMe for the bottom feeders.
Yeah.
They're paying so free. So I was ranked 72 out of 106. My dad delivered the mail at the overachiever. My dad delivered the mail. So he saw the list, went in, asked for a photocopy, and it's on the refrigerator when I get home. I highlight it. And at dinner, he's like, tell your mother. What are you ranked over there? I said 72. She goes, well, and my mother was like Joel Osteen for his born, always smiling, praying for people.
Yeah.
And she goes, well, out of how many? Now, Logan, my mother lived in Chickamauga all her life. She knew it wasn't many, but she was being positive, and I said 106. And my dad's like, just drops his utensils. Man, he's just frustrated. He goes, 72 out of 106. What do you have to say for yourself? So I said the first thing I could think of. I said, hey, it ain't that bad. It's about half. And he goes, boy, that's why you're 72. That's not even close to half of 106. And then I did what every teenager does. I deflected on somebody else.
Sure.
It's like, well, my best friends are 104 and 105.
Oh.
And he's like, well, you hang around idiots. And
Yeah.
I do this whole bit. But people from Chickamauga request that bit because,
Sure.
and even other places. So 72 out of 106. And I'm a big believer in things happening. I'm not a coincidence guy. I think everything can have a purpose.
Sure.
When I ordered these shirts the first time, she goes, well, to get that $1 off, you got to order this many. And when they showed up, there were 106 of them.
Mm.
And I'm like, cool. I sold those in about 3 months. Ordered another set. And I said, I can't afford that many, but to get a discount, what do I need? And she told me to save like 50 cents with 72 t-shirts. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty comical. And I called her about 2 months ago. I said, where are we at on these orders? Can you tell me how many I've done? Because I probably got, 80 in the car or at the house that I take out on shows. She goes, you in 3 years have went through 100 that you bought. And I'm like, dang, man. And it all started when I invested in myself and bought the first 100. So, and these, feel how soft that is. That's a soft shirt.
Yeah, it is a soft shirt.
Now, listen, I'll tell you what I tell the ladies, or they tell me, and it's so funny. This woman came to a show and she was older than me, and I'm being polite. And she's like, I want one of every color. And I said, why? She goes, well, I sleep in them at night. They're my lingerie. And I'm like, oh my, and kidding around. And she's like, potions for her husband. Says, come over here, Clarence. And he looks at me like, God,
You're the one.
And she goes, they're so soft. And they just feel so good.
Yeah, they do.
And I sleep in them, and they're high quality stuff. And he's like, yeah, and I hate them. And I said, why? He goes, because I have to see you on the front or the back anytime I try to get close to her. It's a nice way to put it. And she goes, I sleep so good at night. And so I tease the ladies. I'm like, if you're not getting enough rest, get you a Big Rich t-shirt. I'll do all I can to help. And one guy told me at the show, he goes, hey, I don't care. I just go for it anyway. But we have a restraining order on him. He's not allowed. He doesn't get to come to shows anymore. But this is my gift to you.
Oh, well, thank you, man. I appreciate that.
And people laugh because they're like, why do you keep up with how many shows, how many shirts? Because, man, I got into this when I was 54 years old. I'm like, I don't have a lot of time. I got to get stuff done. And I love goals, love milestones. And I think it just helps me to stay focused, helps me to push forward and do the things that I'm trying to do.
Well, I appreciate that, man. That's really cool.
My pleasure.
That's really cool. So I want to transition, my friend. Every conversation I do with somebody, I ask them kind of towards the end, a collection of questions that has nothing to do really with anything we just talked about. They're all things to get to know you on a human level. I just got to know you, your dreams, your passion, what drives you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know who you are at home.
Okay.
So are you ready?
Fire away.
What is your favorite movie?
Remember the Titans.
Great choice.
Yeah.
Great
Not
choice.
a lot, but most of them are sports based.
Yep.
Or, these action drama kind of things. But remember the Titans, you get the feel good, you get a life lesson, you get some football. The other day, I sent a picture at church of me and this guy. And I said, I always sit on the strong side. There's a quote in there, strong side, right side, the two linebackers going back and forth. Yeah. And maybe 5 people knew what I was talking about. Had no clue. But yes, remember the Titans.
Your first job ever. What was it? There
will be a movie made about this job at some point. And the Adam Sandler John.
I'm there already.
And it was 1985. Basically, not only I worked there, I taught two of my best friends to work with me, and we did all the work that the illegal aliens refused. They're like, we're not doing that. So here's these 15, 16-year-old boys. It's no longer in existence, but it was called Daytel FiberNet. And we basically took their fiber optics equipment that they brought that was scrap, and we had to get it ready to scrap and sell. And it was horrible. The whole thing, but the comedy that came around dropping basically 12 teenagers off every morning on a farm area with a huge warehouse and saying, okay, y'all boys handle that. And there's a stack of maybe 1,000 things that we've got to go through. It took all summer, and the antics that would happen. And I remember I made $3 and 35 cents an hour. My paycheck was $134 a week. And I hit the Eastgate Mall in 1985, and the Record Bar, the Gap, the merry-go-round, getting my clothes, buying concert tickets, paid my car insurance, but everything else, it was just my living it up money. Every concert I ever went to, I bought a ticket off of that job for 2 summers.
Heck yeah. Love that. If you found out that you would not wake up tomorrow, what would your last meal be tonight?
Gosh, man. Steak. Since it's the last one, let's go like porterhouse.
Yeah.
Might as well
just
go.
assume everything you say is just in a peak condition.
Go big or go home. Steak, Caesar salad, sweet potato with all the fun stuff. Maybe a little bit of the, when I say Brussels sprouts, the kind that you go, Brussels sprouts. Not, oh God, air fried with stuff on it.
Oh, yeah.
And then whatever cake somebody's going to march out there. Red velvet.
There we go. You get to organize a music festival that is catered to you. Who are your 3 headliners, alive or dead?
Okay. Golly, man, that's a tough one because I love all styles of music. Other than I'm not really into bluegrass or rap or bluegrass rap. I mean, though, I would have to go, Prince. Here's a tricky one. I'm going to do Van Halen, but I want both.
Okay.
Van Halen and Van Hagar, but I'm only counting them as one. And then I would probably have to bring some old school country along with it, and I would go Waylon Jennings.
Okay. Good choice. Good choices. On a day that you're not working, which I'm sure is few and far between, on a day that you get to take care of you, what is your self-care look like? How do you take care of yourself? How do you recharge?
As I've gotten older, one of the things, and I live by myself at this point in my life, I tend to wake up way too early. Like 4:30,
oh God,
5. Insanely early. So I get up and I'll start working, and then I'll grab an hour nap at about 8 o'clock. And then get up again.
That sounds delightful.
Yeah, it's time to start the day. But if I'm not working, I'll binge watch a little bit of maybe like Currently Reacher or
I need to start the new season of that.
Yeah,
I still need to.
Tulsa King, stuff like that.
Sure.
Do that a little bit. Have a serious, breakfast. If it's good weather, get outside, just enjoy the good weather. And then hopefully get lunch or something with one of my 3 sons and daughter-in-law, or all of them would be a great day. Then throw some music in there. Right. With music, it's funny, Logan, because I get into kicks and I'll listen like Red Clay Strays.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm listening to a lot right now.
They're blowing up right now, too. They're doing well.
Yeah, that's when I'm getting ready to crash. I put that on and listen for a little bit. And I'll do that. I'll listen to them, and then all of a sudden the switch will flip to something else. I did Jason Isbell however, for a while, old country. Then I'll throw in, I love music. There's certain music I listen to before I go on set to do a set or do a show, there's, I'll play 80s stuff for the audience, maybe a little 70s to set the tone. But yeah, to me, music is a huge catalyst in my life. Anyway.
Yeah, that's awesome. What is something that very little people don't know about you?
That they don't know that I'm from the South. Everybody knows I'm from the South as soon as I talk. When I used to be a pastor, I would go to ministers' conferences and stuff, and people would walk up to me and pick up my check because they would just hear me talk for 30 minutes to whoever I was with.
Yeah.
That happened in Wisconsin 3 days in a row.
Hey guys, I want to talk to you a little bit about the company that makes your morning drive happen every week. Are you looking to elevate your business and your brand? Hammerhead Creations is here to help. They offer top-tier marketing services, including social media management, website design, and Google page optimization, ensuring your business reaches the right audience. Whether it's a side hustle or your full-time grind, their expert team, me, is ready to help you grow. Plus, if you're into podcasting like me, Hammerhead Creations offers full support for both in-house shows and external podcast creation. From concept to production, we will help you bring your ideas to life. Visit www.hammerheadcreations.com and discover how we can take your business or your podcast or both to the next level. Hammerhead Creations, swim with the big sharks.
Sure. I thought, oh my gosh, I could just sit and listen.
I really could.
Thank you. Well, I tease because I tell people, I said, man, I can really turn it up to country if I need to. But I worked as a pastor and doing TV and stuff I want to be original and be me, but I'm not, I've lost, I ain't yonder. And, I grew up in Chickamauga, but we moved out to the country when I was in third grade. And one of my bits is I'm like, yeah, I thought I was already there, Logan, before I moved. We moved to 311 Hog Jow Road, Chickamauga, Georgia. So I've overcome a lot.
Sure. What is something that no amount of money will get you to do?
Now, I would do this if my life depended on it.
Sure.
But Big Rich ain't gonna bungee jump, man, or jump out of an airplane. No, thank you. Now, if the airplane's on fire, but these people that go do that I'm not an adrenaline junkie at all. To me, like NASCAR, I'm not in, and I'm probably one of the few guys when I go do shows in Alabama, I'm glad Saban retired because maybe they'll fix the highways now. They spent all their money on Saban
for real
all those years. But, I said, I tease, I said, I drive quick sometimes, but I get that out of my system going through Atlanta, going wherever I go. I'm not an adrenaline guy. I'm very laid back. My personality, now when I do a show, I'm up there, but I'm a laid back person. My father was that way too. I have my moments, but I try to be pretty even keel.
Sure. Similarly, what's your biggest fear?
Man, not being successful. I mean, I rolled the dice on this in a big way. But at the other side of it, when the Apostle Paul said, I've learned how to abound and I've learned how to live abased, meaning I've been up, I've been down, I've been both, Logan. And in ministry, I work for guys that have the jets and the big houses and the humongous churches. That wasn't my lot in life, and I didn't really want to pursue that. But at the same time, doing this, my biggest is I don't want to not be successful. And for me, success in a perfect world, I make enough money to do everything I want to do and not be famous. But normally that doesn't, that will go hand in hand. So anyway.
Sure. A couple more. I think I already know the answer to this question because we talked about it earlier, but what is the title of your memoir?
Come on, somebody. From the pulpit to the punchlines. I was asked to do a Rotary Club meeting in Bartow County by a guy that organized the speakers.
Sure.
And I thought, man, what am I going to say to these clowns? I went. I'd never been to one. And since I was a pastor, I used to do that stuff. But I went. And Logan, the thing that was cool about it was the camaraderie that Rotary Club has there. It was like a told them when I got up to speak, I said, and a lot of them were my age, some older, some younger. And for some reason, a lot of them were bald. And, so my opening line was, man, y'all's camaraderie and the way y'all act. I don't know if I'm in a comedy club or a church or the waiting room of the hair club for men. I mean, it's crazy. But he says, do what you want. So I did 8 minutes of comedy. And then I took 10 minutes to talk about how I went from how I found ministry and then how I left and how I found comedy. And when I got through, and the book was just in the back of my mind back then, but when I got finished, 3 different guys came up to me from 3 different decades of life and all said, thank you. I'm at a place. 1 lost their job, 2 were leaving their jobs to pursue their passion. And they said, what you talked about is exactly what I've been wondering. And you answered some of those questions. So I prayed about it, thought about it, and that title dropped from the pulpit to the punchlines, how I went from here to there. So yeah, that'll be the memoir.
I like it. And then lastly, my friend, we've kind of touched on bits and pieces of it over the course of today, but what does success look like to you? And I think you just said having enough money to do what you want. But
to me, I am one of those guys that when I say, what is success? And I got asked this the other week. I was in a meeting with a potential management kind of thing. And I don't know if I'm a comedy club guy. I feel like I'm a theater show, but I've got to get popular enough to be able to fill a theater. I fill wineries. I do a lot of wineries around the area. I do a lot of breweries. I do some comedy clubs. But for me to be the word success is I want to take my soon to be bringing back podcast, my comedy books, that and make that my life's work and how I make a living and where my children they look, to me, success is my kids looking and thinking, okay, dad's doing what he loves and he does it well. Those 3 and my daughter-in-law are the ones that I think about when I do what I do and who I tell if I'm doing something that might, quote, not cross the line, but if I question it, I think about what would they think. I tease, I tell people that I waited getting to comedy until after both my parents died. My dad would be like, oh my God, how much longer is this thing? And my mother would be on the front row going, that is not true. That is not true.
Yeah.
I do that. Not my baby.
That would be the first thing if I did comedy and I invited my parents. We'd finish the show. My dad would be like, that was fun. My mom would be like, yeah, that's fun too. But, you really kind of stretched that story. I'm like, yeah, Mom, it's comedy. That's what you do.
Logan, my family, my aunts from I tease, I call them all my favorite aunt, uncles, cousins have been to different shows. And one of my cousins made this statement, I've always supported you and I love you and everything you've done. And I thought when you were in the ministry that was your thing until I saw you do this. You are really living your purpose right now. And I thought that kind of summed up what I hope I do and continue to do.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, now, Rich, I'm going to let you talk to the people directly, tell them how to find you, where to get this awesome, comfortable merch, helping people sleep every step of the way. Go ahead and advertise yourself, my friend.
Now, I laugh. That shirt for men, no, you're a married guy, so you have to be careful.
Well, that's all right.
But if you wear that out at Planet Fitness, the women will be all over you. Yep. They'll be like, oh my God, Big Rich? Oh my gosh, isn't he hilarious?
Yep. Oh yeah, man.
I tease people, I could tell you all these shows coming up, but the best thing to do is my website is bigrichbrock.com. All one word, bigrichbrock.com. That'll tell you all upcoming shows, events, bio, how to hire me. I do everything from, I've done corporate events with 500 corporate events with 30 people. I've done private shows. I do fundraising events where people are saying, hey, we're doing a big black tie thing. Would you be the entertainment? Comedy clubs, wineries. Wineries are my bread and butter. That is my niche right now. And, I tease, I do a couple coffee shops. I do one coffee shop show near my hometown monthly, and I work new material and I see old friends. And that's in Ringgold, Georgia.
Yeah.
But if you live anywhere from Chattanooga to Atlanta, you can find me within an hour of you. And I also have got shows. I'm headed to Destin Memorial Day weekend. I'm doing 2 theater shows down there for Panama City Comedy. I've got things I do with Comedy Zone, which is nationwide. I mainly work Southeast. And I'm hoping, for that to continue to expand. But find me on the website, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, as long as we have it. I'm on all that stuff. Now, just know if you go on to my TikTok, I don't have a ton of stuff on there. And my YouTube, I've got to update. It's all stuff from when I first started like 2 years ago. It's funny, but it's a whole lot better now. That's like Dry Bar, go to Dry Bar. You can get a free trial, put in Big Rich Brock. They'll give you a discount if you want to subscribe. But I did that Dry Bar. Real quick, I met a guy at a show in Nashville Sunday, and he opened for me, and he was back there talking about his Dry Bar. And I said, oh, cool. When did you do it? He said 4 years ago. And he goes, it's coming out next month. And I was like, and that's not necessarily not normal. A lot of those guys they'll pay you a standard fee to come out there. You come out there on your own. It doesn't matter if you're Big Rich or, Adam Carolla. You get paid the same.
Okay.
Come out there, film a 28 minutes, 50 seconds. And you do 2 the same night. And then they edit it, do whatever they do. And you might be released, you might not. I've met people that said, man, I did that 8 years ago.
Wow.
It's never come out.
Wow.
Then another guy said, 4, and it's being released next month. And I'm like, that's cool, man. Congrats. He goes, thank you so much. And he's like, and he didn't know me. And I love because I'm older, they're like, what's this guy headlining for? He's comedy a couple of years.
Right.
And he goes, well, maybe you'll get one. And I said, well, I've done Dry Bar. Really? And he goes, yeah. I said, I did it like my first year of comedy. And he goes, well, when was that? I said, I filmed it on May, and I know it was May 5th, 2023. And he's like, oh, man, well, hopefully they'll release it. And I'm like, already have. They released it 9 months later. Like, no.
Yeah, for real.
He finally shut up. He learned. But,
Yeah.
My point in that special, when it came out real quick, I watched it and I thought, it hit me emotionally. But then I also realized, man, I'd only done 50 shows. I've done 300 plus. It's so much tighter. It's so much better. I've got new material. I've got things that I expound on, and a funny story, true story, which the best comedy is something truth based. I'm sitting around, divorced dad, living in an apartment, downsized. My kids are all over the state of Georgia, all 3 of them. Please don't read that into I have kids all over the state of Georgia that I know of. No. So I'm like, I know everybody's got their things. They all, girlfriends or wife, in-laws, their mother. I said, we'll do Christmas whenever we do Christmas. If it's the 24th, January 3rd, whenever y'all can. So Christmas, the day after, is when they release my special on Dry Bar.
Nice.
And I'm sitting around in my basement apartment at the time, watched it. And then I watched it again. I said, well, there's 2 views, nothing else. And then my phone rings. And it's like the day after Christmas. I don't know, who's calling, and it was a number from South Dakota. And I'm like, that's weird. Who's telemarketing the day after Christmas?
Right.
And I'm like, hello. And it was a woman's voice, I think. No, she's like, hey, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just watching my Dry Bar special. Me too. I'm watching it. And I was like, oh, thank you. And I'm like, this is weird. And she's like, it's not that hard to find your phone number online. And I said, it will be tomorrow. But I'm like, what do I do? What do I say? Because she goes, do you ever perform and do shows in South Dakota? And I was like, well, no person. I didn't know if it's a ma'am. I went on the street. I said, no, ma'am. And I said, no, ma'am, I haven't. She goes, well, if you do and you need somebody somewhere to stay, you can stay with me, honey. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm getting a proposition on the day after Christmas from some crazy lady in South Dakota. And Logan, my thought was, this is my one fan. I don't want to make her mad, but I got to figure out a way to get out of this. So the only thing I could come up with, I said, well, let me ask my husband and see what that's about. And God bless you if that's the way you roll, but Big Rich loves the ladies. And she's like, oh, okay. Well, God bless. So if you're watching this, if you're a Logan fan too, he's married. No, but I thought that's all, it just, my point, that kind of talk and thinking fast I've been like that all my life. So from pulpit to punchlines and doing comedy, I've just always had that and normally I stop it. Something will come in my head and I filter it. Oh, I don't need to say that. But I thought that's pretty funny. And I told her that and she backed off, but then she still liked my comedy.
Yeah, there you go.
She's probably like, that's the sweetest man down there in Carter's.
Yeah.
So I just love the fact that I can bring laughter to people and hope and encouragement. And find me on BigRichBrock.com. Come out to a show. It's safe enough to bring your mama. Your kids under 18 aren't going to understand it. You'll have to explain everything, but they're welcome. The other night, man, I did a show in Nashville and nice comedy club, but the whole front row, like 20 seats empty, everything else full. And I walk out and I'm like, well, man, this is like the Baptist church all over. The whole front row is empty except for 2 kids that were the children of one of the comics. And they're sitting on the front with their feet up. And I'm like, this is like the, Baptist church all over again with the pastor's kids that don't listen to what they want. And everybody started laughing and they got it. And then I didn't change my stuff because I don't get vulgar. Like I'm doing a church show in a couple hours.
Yeah.
There's 2 or 3 things I won't do in that show because it might be offensive to people.
Sure.
But at the same time, I'll come right out of the gates with something that and in my circles, if I use the term religious, that's not a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody that's kind of, I want to be, I'll come out with, something like one of my things I'll say at a church show. I said, listen, just so you know, my show that I do in a bar is almost the same thing I do here. I tend to swear more at the church show. And either they laugh or I know I got my work cut out for me. So,
right.
Yeah, but I've had a blast. Thanks for having me.
Of course, man.
What a great concept. Much success to you.
Thank you.
Personally and in this. And you and the missus, let me know. We'll get you out to a show real soon.
Oh man, I was thinking this whole time. I was like, I can't wait as soon as you leave to call her and say we have to go to a show as soon as possible. So we also live in Cartersville. So if you're popping around in Cartersville, then we'll make it out when it's when it makes sense for us. And
the Legion Theater, the Pump House Players, the Legion Theater, it's built in 1980s, and they're working on it. It's remodeled in stages, but that place is a 75-seat old school theater in Southern Cove in Cartersville. Helps me. They sponsor the night, which helps me. And we do a meet and greet down there before the show, little cocktail hour.
Amazing.
Yeah. Then you can, cause it's the weekend in downtown, bring your drinks into the theater. So one night there was a kid there about 22. I did an intermission and I told everybody, this kid right here, I talked to him before the show. He's going down to Southern Cove to reload. So if you need something, and he had like 9 people bring back beers and this and that, I said, man, we'll split the profits on that. But it's a great night. I do that. My next one there's in April, but I do that show 10 months out of the year.
Okay.
And Pump House Players loves the fact that I'm local. I bring in that show for people in the area. The vision of it, when I went to them into Southern Cove, I said, I want to bring a top-notch comedy show to downtown Cartersville on a Saturday night where you can have dinner, a drink, a show, and be home by 9:30.
That's awesome,
10
man.
o'clock at the latest.
That's my wife will hear this, and that's her love language right there.
Yes. And every comic I bring in is either Atlanta, Chattanooga, or Nashville. All of them have their own shows, or they're out there working it, or they're touring. And that's the qualification for that show. I don't bring some of my shows. I've had people at a show saying, I want to do what you do. And I'm like, have you done an open mic? No, go do one. Film it, send it to me. I've booked 4 comics in the last year that all said that to me, and they followed up on it. And I've hired them to do 6 minutes, 8 minutes. There's one lady, she's doing her own shows now.
Wow, good for her.
You asked that earlier, but I like helping people along. But the thing I've learned is, like a lot of things, whether it's podcasting or whatever, somebody might seem enthusiastic for a minute, but will they do the few things? I never ask much. I said, if you'll film the set, send it to me, and then I'm happy to sit down with you and work on. All you need is 4 minutes.
Yeah.
But it sounds easy until you get up there,
Right.
And you're realizing, okay, nobody laughed in 2.5 minutes, or nobody laughed at all, or I've said the same nervous tick.
Right.
27 times.
Right. We're having a good time.
Yeah. Film it, do it. Now, for me, Come On Somebody is my trademark. It's my get her done. It's my, we're having a good time. And I can say that and mention it. And it's that old preacher, because it happened. Pentecostal type churches, if you don't speak an hour, you're not speaking. You better be. And when you preach at a half black, half white church, and I'd never done that till I showed up there in Chattanooga, people talk back to you during the sermon. The black culture talks back, and they would say things like, amen, yes, Lord, come on, somebody, preach it, tell your story. I got
sure.
phraseology of all that stuff.
Sure.
And when it first happened, I thought, oh my gosh, they're talking back. And then I realized, oh no, that's a good thing. They're in. And that's been, like I said, it's been a trademark. On the other side of it, it covers the innuendo, on that side too. I do another bit that talks about, I just do things that I'm just good old former pastor from Chickamauga, Georgia. But then you can read into it things and go, man, dude, what if he knows that's what that could mean?
Right.
And I just act like I don't as I'm selling shirts.
That's awesome, man.
Thanks, brother, for having me.
Absolutely. Guys, I'll make sure that Big Rich Brock's website is in our description of the episode so that it's easily findable. Of course, when we post the episode, we'll link it as well so that you can easily get in touch with him, find his next events, all of those fun things. Follow him on all his socials. Again, like I said at the top, if you want to follow me along for the ride, follow my show on the socials, Your Morning Drive, on everything. Of course, if you need other things like from our sponsors, Good Days, Fireworks Co-working, and the few other people that work with us, check out the description of the episode as well. Thanks again, everybody. Take care. See you next time.
Take care.